Shaganadowu, who's joining us.
Oh, did we lose Mark?
I think we did.
I think Mark was in the process of welcoming Sagan, who he promised me he'd be here when I saw him on City Hall Plaza, and he's here. Good to see you.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Mark, you're on mute. We lose Mark?
Yeah, I think you lost me for a moment there.
Mark was in the process of welcoming
Sagan. Yes, I was in the process.
Promised me he'd be here when I saw him on City Hall Plaza. And you're producing an echo, Mark.
Maybe I will go off and come back on. Is that okay?
Yeah, well, I'll call the roll and we'll get started. Okay, we'll see. That was weird. So it's always weird to hear your own voice playing back through the Zoom. All right, so I will call this a meeting of the MAPC Executive Committee to order. Today is December 14th, 2022. Because we are meeting remotely, we are conducting this via Zoom, consistent with Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022. I will have to call the roll of everybody in attendance, and all votes today will have to be done via roll call as well. So I will just go down the list I have before me. Do we have Ime?
Here.
Sharonda? Colette? Thought I saw Colette.
Here, sorry, I was on mute here.
It's okay. Kurt? Karen? Adam Chaplin, I'm here. Jen?
Here.
Tom? No. John DePriest?
Here.
Mo Handel?
Here.
Sagan?
Here.
Thank you. Tabor?
Here.
Angie? No. Gina?
Here.
Steve Olenoff?
Here.
Sarah Lewis? Courtney? Vandana? Sam?
Here.
Steve Silvera?
Here.
Monica? Juan? Elaine?
Here.
And Aaron?
Here.
And I saw Karen joined us, I think, just after I called her name, and Sharonda is joining, and Buzz is joining as well.
Here.
Great to see you all. Thank you for joining. So the first agenda item for us to address is the approval of the minutes from November 16th, 2022, which I believe were circulated yesterday. Are there any questions, comments, or revisions for the minutes?
Where were they circulated, Adam? Because I had trouble finding them.
Mark, were they on your email yesterday? Let me see.
Yes, I hope they were.
Let's double check that quick.
I might have missed it.
Yeah, Mark, I believe you missed it because I couldn't find it either.
All right.
Yeah,
Andrea, it might be possible that you can find that faster than I can, or we
Yeah.
can simply do it. Well, maybe it's best to do it next month. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm seeing multiple copies of the income statement and the legislative priorities, but no copy of them.
All right, let's do it next month.
I won't complain about one less roll call, so that's that's okay.
We'll do November and December at the January meeting.
Great. Thank you, Mark. All right, so why don't we move to the third agenda item, which is the report of the treasurer to talk about the income statements from July, August, and September. So Sam, direct to you on this.
Sure. Yep. We're going to go through 3 months of income statements, starting back in July, which is the beginning of the fiscal year, and we'll get ourselves up to September, which is the end of quarter number 1. And the first thing I want to do is just recognize the hard work of everybody at MAPC, because when you look at the July income statement, you'll notice that the overhead rate is quite high. It's at 149%. And when that number came in, everybody at MAPC went back to the books just to check everything and go through it again and just make sure that that actually was an accurate number. It turns out it is an accurate number. And the explanation for it is two things. One, there was some maternity/paternity leave in the middle of the summer. That's a nice thing, but it means that you can't, when you're at home, you can't be billing to projects. So those are the trade-offs. The other explanation for that number is that July was really the first month after basically 3 years of COVID that people could actually take some time off. And that also increased the administrative expenses as it relates to direct labor, the billing side, when you're billing out to projects. So that's what pushed that number up. Not always the best way to start off a fiscal year, but it is what it is. And that's just what everybody had to deal with. If we move forward to August, which is obviously the next month, the following month, it's month 2 of the fiscal year, you'll see that the overhead rate came way down below our target rate of 118%. It went down to 107.2%, which is good because what we're going to basically be playing catch up against the July number, and we're trying to bring that number down over the next 12 months. So the 107.2% at an overhead rate is a good thing. That was great. And if you want to dig a little deeper, you can look and you can compare the direct labor in July, which was its $342,000, to the direct labor in August, which is at $412,000 dollars. So that just means that we were able to bill a lot more to projects in August. Again, a good thing. And then we're going to move on to September, which is the last. Sorry.
I like elephants.
Oh,
Sure.
oh, hi.
And unexpected.
Well, I think that's just background noise, Sam. If everybody could mute, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Sorry for the pause there. The last month we're looking at is September. Again, our overhead rate is looking good. It's at 120.4%. So we're starting to get into a kind of an equilibrium here, which is good. That's what we want to see. And we're bringing down that overhead, that cumulative overhead rate, the month-to-month overhead rate to 124%. What we're aiming for at the end of the fiscal year, which will be next June, is 118%. So we started with a very high number in July, but we're slowly bringing that down. And that's very good. We're able to bill to projects and our administrative expenses are going down. The only other thing I would bring to your attention is that our net loss or decrease to fund balance, which is the bottom line on the furthest right-hand corner, so the fiscal cumulative number for September was a negative $61,000. That means we're running a deficit of $61,000 in September. But the reason for that is that we've been way out of whack with what we've been able to bill to projects versus what we've had for administrative expenses. I think there's every expectation that that number will even itself out over the course of 12 months. And they're typically at MAPC, November and December are high billing months because a lot of projects end their funding cycles at the end of December. So people are billing furiously to those projects to make sure they get all the work done. And that will mean that our direct labor should be quite high. That pretty much covers the waterfront on that. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Questions for Sam?
I'll just see if Anna, our finance director, wants to add anything. Sam, that was, I think, a very thorough explanation of the situation.
Yeah, that was a very good, explanation, Sam. Thank you very much. So Sam and I have met over these results, and I'm pretty confident that we will, come down on that overhead rate, because that is a very important aspect of our finances as we have filed that rate with the state and with the feds. Thank you.
I'll just add a couple of things. First of all, a big thanks to Anna and to several directors on the staff, particularly Catherine and Lizzie, and Mark Rassicott, Tim Reardon, and Martin Pillsbury. But I want to give a special thank you to Mark Rassicott for a tremendous amount of effort to address the overhead issue, to review the numbers, to adjust the numbers where appropriate and necessary. And a big thank you to Anna for monitoring the overall situation. We have very strong finances at MAPC. folks who are veterans of this board know there's virtually never a need to spend more than 3 or 4 minutes on finances. But it is nonetheless worth noting for newer members of the committee what the overhead rate is and why it matters to us. Most people don't realize this, but if you actually look at MAPC's finances, you realize this is overwhelmingly a federally funded institution. And as a result, we are required by the federal government to do many of the things we do. We are required to monitor hours. We are required to bill by the hour. We are required to establish an overhead rate that gets approved in a very particular way and to apply that overhead rate to all of our expenditures. It is very important to try and land the plane on that overhead rate at the end of the year. There are consequences for it being too high. Frankly, there are even worse consequences for it being too low, because then you have to turn around and repay people. CTPS got into that situation once, and we do not want to ever get into that situation. Neither do they. So we monitor overhead very, very carefully. We have plenty of money in the bank usually, but we don't actually recognize the revenue on the income statement until people bill to that money. We always are monitoring the ratio between the amount we bill to individual projects as a numerator over the amount we bill for indirect or administrative expenses of the agency. And administrative expenses of the agency include many things that are not actually administrative. They include when we go to a conference. They include when we do work on public policy, which is generally not funded by individual projects. They include professional development time. They include a lot of things that aren't actually administrative. And we're always monitoring that ratio. We try to keep the administrative costs as low as we can, but equally as important, we have to bill to projects to keep that numerator up. Because what matters at the end is the fraction. So we are very careful and cautious about that. We have a bit of a gap to make up during the remainder of the year, and we're going to accomplish that. And the deficit issue should flow from that. We have always, in the time that I've been here, except the very first year, run a positive fund balance at the end of every year. And it has its ups or downs. We don't want that to be too big. We usually have a fund balance increase of maybe $20,000, $40,000 a year. And my guess is that we will be at that point again, but it requires a lot of very hard work and a lot of careful attention to detail and a lot of generating of new projects in order that staff will always have work to accomplish and work to build. So I will pause with that, see if anyone has any questions or if Sam or Anna have anything they want to add.
Any questions for Mark, Anna, or Sam?
My only addition is that concludes my portion of the treasurer's report.
Thank you, Sam.
Which we now need to adopt.
Yes, so if I can, Adam, can I hand that back to you for adoption of the treasurer's report?
Sure. So I will entertain a motion to adopt the treasurer's report.
I'll
So
make
moved.
that motion. Second.
I'll give that to who? I know I saw John
I'll second.
DePriest's mouth moving.
I made the motion.
I second.
I'll give a motion by Tabor, seconded by John DePriest. All right, I will call the roll. Just get my paper here. Ime.
Aye.
Sharonda.
Aye.
Colette.
Aye.
Kurt. Karen.
Aye.
Adam, I vote aye. Jen.
Aye.
Tom. John DePriest.
Aye.
Mo.
Aye.
Sugan.
Aye.
Tabor.
Aye.
Angie. Gina.
Aye.
Steve Olenoff.
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
Courtney. Vandana. Sam.
Aye.
Steve Silvera.
Aye.
Monica. Juan. Elaine.
Aye.
Aaron.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. Thank you all for that. Next agenda item is number 4 is the report of the executive director, which this month will be a verbal report delivered by Mark.
Adam, thank you very much. First of all, I just want to be clear. There's no echo now, is there? Okay, good. All right. And I started off trying to introduce Shigan, which unfortunately I then was immediately kicked off screen. I don't know why. But I do want to welcome Shigan Ado, who is the mayor's chief advisor on economic development in the city of Boston. And also, I think it's fair to say, a fairly long-standing friend of mine and a great leader in the city and in the state. He ran the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts prior to taking this job. And I wondered, Adam, with your indulgence, if we could maybe give Shigan an opportunity to introduce himself and just say a little bit about his role at the city.
That'd be great.
All right. Well, I didn't come prepared, but I'll just say
Sorry,
that
I just threw that on you. I apologize.
No problem. I mean, it's great to finally be here. I want to thank Diego, who's on our intergovernmental relations team, for filling in on the days that I couldn't. But these are all on the calendar, so I'll make sure to be way more present than in the past. But I will thank you all for sharing my 11-month and 12-day anniversary in this role. So that's why we're all here today, of course. And yeah, I mean, we've done a lot in this last year, and I'll just say very quickly that everything that we've been doing has fallen under 4 categories, which I know that everyone here has been focused on in their respective locations as well, which goes for COVID recovery, neighborhood revitalization, equitable investments, and shared prosperity, which is our workforce development strategies. So that's the work that we continue to do. And I'm excited for the opportunity to share ideas and hear what folks are doing in other parts of the region, and finding more ways to collaborate across our borders.
Great, Shigan, thank you very much. It's great to have you with us. And also, it's always great to have Diego too. So let me give you a few updates on some items that have been happening lately. One is I want to talk a little bit about the Metro Mayors Coalition. The Mayors Coalition met yesterday in Revere. It was an in-person meeting. We had good attendance. I think virtually all our communities were represented, in most cases by the mayor or manager, in a few cases by others. We adopted policies of the Housing Task Force, the Metro Mayors Housing Task Force. That included 2 parts, both legislative priorities for the upcoming session and executive priorities for interaction with the new Healy-Driscoll administration. Basically, the Metro Mayors Coalition, as I think you know, adopted several years ago a housing production target of 185,000 units between 2015 and 2030. It has always been the perspective of the mayors and managers that in order to achieve that goal, we need the Commonwealth's help and support. And the goal yesterday was to try and enunciate exactly what some of those elements of help and support might be. Many of them, not surprisingly, relate to funding, but many of them are policy recommendations that don't directly relate to funding. And that was adopted, I think, unanimously by the group. And I want to thank the housing staff of many of the member communities that actually helped us to put that list together, along with the efforts of our government affairs team and our housing staff. The Metro Mayors Coalition also adopted legislative priorities for the year. And obviously today, the Executive Committee for MAPC will adopt a similar, not identical and not contradictory, but similar list of legislative priorities for the entire region for the upcoming legislative session. Metro Mayors also voted to incorporate a new member yesterday. The city of Watertown applied to join Metro Mayors and was unanimously accepted. So there are now 16 members in the Metro Mayors Coalition. The North Shore Coalition, which consists of, or which comprises mayors and managers from the North Shore, is a somewhat larger group. It's about 23, I think. Someone on the call from GA will correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but I think it's about 23 communities. 4 or 5 fairly large cities, and the rest are towns, including very small towns. So it is a somewhat different profile in that way from Metro Mayors, which tends to be larger, more urbanized communities routinely. North Shore Coalition will be meeting again in person in Salem on Friday, and it's a little bit of a momentous day for us because our longtime chair, Mayor Kim Driscoll from Salem, will be turning over the gavel to a successor, and she will also be hosting us for what will be her last meeting before she leaves her position as mayor and assumes responsibility as the new lieutenant governor of the Commonwealth. It would be impossible for me to say too many nice things about the leadership that Kim has provided to the North Shore Coalition, to MAPC, and really to the Commonwealth as a whole during the COVID crisis, when she was really a stalwart leader, trying to bring communities together and achieve common goals of protecting our residents and then eventually having an economic recovery. So that will be taking place on Friday. I do want to mention a little something about COVID, which is not a topic we talk about as much these days. But I'll be honest, I sometimes feel like maybe we should be talking about it a little bit more than we do, since 500 Americans die every day as a result of COVID. We are seeing an increase, and we are monitoring carefully the increase in hospitalizations due not only to COVID, but also due to RSV and flu. You know that our policy at MAPC is we require everyone to be fully up to date with CDC vaccinations, including the bivalent booster. We also encourage our staff to be vaccinated for the flu. And we encourage all of our staff, we actually require all of our staff, if they are ill, not feeling well, to stay out of the office. And that has enabled us to keep the infection rate at MAPC and CTPS down quite low. It's never zero, but it's almost always, it seems to be about one a week. We are monitoring the hospital situation very carefully. I know that I personally have discussed it with a number of local leaders, particularly in those communities that host small hospitals. And our health and medical coordinating coalition staff, Beth Roberts and Dan Witz, continue their stalwart efforts to assist hospitals in obtaining equipment, sharing equipment, and finding space for patients who need that space. People don't often realize that is an active role that MAPC plays through the HMCC. And I remain, as I've said before, very proud of the work that Dan and Beth do, and their supervisors, Amy and Mark, in trying to help the Commonwealth to adjust and make it through what seemed to be this endless series of health-related challenges that face us. On the economic development front, and Shagun may have more that he'd like to add on this, I'm not sure, we are now implementing the Good Jobs Challenge, which we received through the application of the City of Boston, and with a wide array of partners to help improve the economic status, the workforce status of the region in regard to three critical sectors: childcare, healthcare, and clean energy. MAPC staff are actively involved on the clean energy and childcare side, particularly. We also have a series of administrative and management responsibilities in overseeing this $23 million grant. The grant provides about $800,000 of funding to MAPC over a period of, I believe, 3 years. At the same time, while we're doing that, implementing this major grant from the EDA, Raul Gonzalez is also working from our economic development staff on helping individual communities, businesses, nonprofits, colleges, and other institutions to apply for and obtain EDA funding. As I think you all know, we've recently received a great deal of success in that regard with funds for the Museum of Science. I think it's Mass Bay Community College. I hope I'm getting that right. Goodwill Industries and others. And just yesterday, I had a conversation on the phone introducing Raul to another nonprofit organization seeking to develop a workforce enhancement center on their facility in Jamaica Plain to see if there's the possibility of any EDA funding. Again, this role that we play with the EDA is not always known by people. I encourage you on behalf of your towns or other leaders in your communities who might need funding for good projects that help to create jobs, that we are always ready to talk with people about possible applications and see if we can bring additional resources into the region. Also in the land use department, a lot of our efforts, particularly but not exclusively in the housing division, have been focused on the implementation of everybody's favorite mandate, Section 3A of Chapter 40A, which passed recently. We have done several webinars on that. As you know, we are providing technical assistance to a number of communities. We are still working with the administration on clearer interpretation of their guidelines, which I think is an ongoing challenge. And right now, we are trying to see if we can do two broad efforts to help our communities. The first of those, which we are trying to get permission from DHCD to do and to fund, is to do a unified review of compliance in the 12 so-called rapid transit communities, to determine across all of those communities whether they are currently in compliance or what they might need to do in order to be brought into compliance. The other thing we are trying to do, which is a slightly bigger lift, is to see if we can create a situation where all of our communities know the level of affordability that they would be allowed to require through inclusionary zoning or other means without running afoul of these very complicated and difficult guidelines, which have opened a door, thank you, Erin, the new guidelines have opened a door for requiring affordability at or above 10%, but they continue to read in a way that might incline communities to believe they shouldn't go over 10%, or they might be disqualified for doing so. And we would like to review all of our communities based upon our economic submarkets, because we've divided, data services has divided the entire region into economic submarkets, and to determine for each of those economic submarkets what level you could go to and still be in compliance with the guidelines. And in that way, we'd really like to sort of finish that for all 101 communities, or the 98 of them that are in the MBTA district, as opposed to every single community having to do its own process to figure out what level of affordability it could require. We're not as far along on being able to accomplish that as we are on the first one. I'm really pretty confident the first one is going to happen. I'm less confident about the second one. We would do all the work, but we're not the decision makers here, but we're working on it quite hard. And through all of this, we are open to providing technical assistance to the communities in our district who need it, to determine if they are in compliance, or to figure out a pathway to come into compliance. We are prioritizing working with communities that will have an affordability component to their plan. Just because we have 98 communities, we can't do them all at once. So that's a little bit about 3A. I know people may have questions. If you have questions, please email me or call me at another time. I would be glad to try and route you to the right person in MAPC or answer the question myself if that's possible. I'm going to pause there. There are probably 40 other things I could talk about that are going on in MAPC, but I think I've covered some interesting ones, and so I'll pause there. I really want us to get to, we have a big legislative agenda to cover today.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions for Mark on his report? Colette, did you raise your hand?
Not particularly, but I'm just I'm trying to digest that and thinking how to share this with the people in our group that are working on compliance with this particular issue, and thinking that if they did want technical assistance, that's that call that we have right now from MAPC asking who wants technical assistance with what. So we apply through that channel. Okay, thank you.
That is not the only way in the door on Chapter 3A. But since that call is out currently, that's the best way to ask for support under Chapter 3A is to file a TAP application.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, why don't we move to the report of the Legislative Committee, which will include both some general legislative updates as well as a report and a request for review and approval of MAPC legislative priorities for the 2023. I'm guessing it means 23-24 session of the General Court on the agenda. So who am I turning this to? Mark, Lizzie, Leah, who's going first?
Keith can start and then.
Keith, all right. Sorry, I didn't mean to leave you out, Mr. Chairman.
No, that's quite all right. Keith Bergman, Chair of the Legislative Committee. We've met on a couple of times to review the work of staff. The Executive Committee is to take a vote today on our legislative priorities for the upcoming legislative session 2023 to 2024. The bulk of the positions in the package are ones that have previously been voted by the Executive Committee. So we're going to highlight those additional ones that we've discussed, so-called new legislative priorities. One of the things that was discussed at the Legislative Committee level was it's a big list. We're into an awful lot here, and that we understand that there, as things go forward with the new legislative session, it will be better able to identify which are the priority items that have the best chance of movement. But this is sort of the universe of all the things that MAPC stands for, and it's a lot. So I would turn it over to, let me look at my screen and see if I see Lizzie smiling. So we go to Lizzie first. All right. And Leah's smiling too, but she'll come next. So thanks all.
Thanks, Keith. I will be very brief before I turn it over to Leah to introduce the legislative portfolio for your consideration and vote today. But I actually just wanted to offer a note of thanks to the entire government affairs team and to our legislative committee, because this process, as Keith said, is long. We are nothing if not thoughtful at MAPC. And so we actually start doing this work to get ready for the next legislative session, even before the previous legislative session has ended. So the team, Georgia and Matt, started having meetings internally with staff and MAPC in June and July, and then really broadened conversations to a really long list of advocacy stakeholders, some folks that we work with all the time, some folks that we work with relatively infrequently, and then some of our partners in community-based organizations to try to craft this list together. So it's a lot of conversations and meetings and balancing of interests and getting kind of like that sweet spot of legislative priorities for your consideration. And then the legislative committee actually hears about this like for 3 or 4 meetings in a row. So we bring them our old legislative priorities as a reminder. We have conversations about things that they're hearing about in their own communities or in their own advocacy work. And we kind of begin this very long and iterative process of talking about our new legislative priorities. And of course, the government affairs team, it was an in-between set of staffing situations as I was wearing 2 hats in my new role and still helping with government affairs. And then Leah came back, and that is why we are able to finally take it across the finish line to you for consideration and vote today. So with that, I just wanted to offer my thanks for everybody who was involved. It's always a long process, but I'm excited about what we have for you today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leah.
Thanks, Lizzie. It has been a fun process to get to work on with everyone. And so you have 3 documents that were sent to you, and there is only my understanding of the process, and I'm hoping Keith and Adam can correct me, is that there will only be a vote necessary on the first document, which is our new legislative priorities. The other 2 documents, I'm glad to have many more conversations about, but hoping we can really dig in on the new legislative priorities. The second document is items that are, and I think I have frozen.
We can hear you, but your screen is.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn off my screen and hope maybe you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Okay, we'll keep going like this then. Sorry for the internet challenges, even in Cambridge, high-speed internet. needs to be a priority. So there's the new legislative priorities, and then the other documents are items that we want to continue to research, which you will notice is a long list of items, and it is not exhaustive, but it is an example of some of the things that are top on our minds that we want to keep researching with other folks within MAPC and with partner agencies. And then the longest list is those items that are continuing. And it's a selection of items that we brought in past years to legislative and executive committee that we think are top of mind for us and for legislators going into the session. But again, anything that we've taken a vote on, we think, hopefully could come up. We're always optimistic about what the legislature will consider. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, if that might be better for folks to see as I talk through the new legislative priorities. Can folks see my screen okay?
Yes.
We can see it, Leah.
Great. Okay. So the first item that we are bringing to you as a new legislative priority is around rapid delivery data and fees. And this is building off of research that is just released from MAPC. You should all come to the briefing that is happening tomorrow. And I'm hoping maybe Georgia, you can drop the link to that in the chat. But what has been really exciting, MAPC has been working on TNC data and fees for a number of years. And unfortunately, when the legislation was first crafted, it was really specific around delivering passengers. And during the pandemic, the world shifted in terms of how transportation network companies are operating, and delivering meals and home products has become a far greater impact on our streets. So this would provide similar data around that research field, around that field, and also a similar fee on those transportation network visits. We're also looking at an arts and culture proposal. And what we are looking to do in this category, there's really broadly looking at how we can support cultural spaces. So these are proposals that we would be looking to draft and work closely with our partners in the arts and culture space to really create and preserve creative spaces. It's an area we've been talking about a lot on the planning side, but hasn't come up as much to the legislation side. And this is a new item, just to call out, even since we brought this document to the legislative committee, sort of a late breaking item that we wanted to really make sure made it into the proposal. And I see Mark has come off mute, so I don't know if you want to add on that item, Mark.
No.
Okay.
Mark just forgot to go off mute. That's all.
Okay. The next item is on housing improvements, and this is again a very technical proposal where we want to continue to collect, or rather begin to collect more data around housing, so that we can better understand what's happening across our communities and make sure that we're putting forward the strongest housing policy solutions that can actually address the challenges that communities are facing. And make sure that it's comparable across communities. The next item, and again, you'll note, hopefully these heading topics are familiar. They're all from Metro Common, as we really are in this document keeping a focus, and in our legislative priorities generally, a focus on how are we making that giant, wonderful report of Metro Common a reality. So the HOPE Act is looking at first responders and would create a requirement to carry the opioid antagonist, naloxone. And right now, many of our providers are carrying it. It's a proposal that's been supported by the Mass Police Chiefs Association. It would include the Good Samaritan legislation. We think this is a really big step that would help prevent opioid overdose deaths. Another new proposal under equity of wealth and health would be around inclusive entrepreneurship. And this proposal would really look at our small business district improvement funds. It's a mouthful, so I say that one 5 times fast. and make sure that we're investing strategically in those districts, in communities that are underrepresented in the business community. Would also include some tracking of how that assistance is getting rolled out to minority-owned businesses, and making sure that we're really analyzing how lending is happening, and the impact of lending opportunities on minority borrowers. Because we know that it's not enough money is going there, but we don't have enough data yet. So this would be really helpful in better understanding the landscape and making sure that we as a Commonwealth are best directing and best stewarding our funds. Cooperative purchasing is an area. This is, again, a very technical proposal that we are bringing forward that would clarify that when you're doing cooperative purchasing agreement contracts, those can be awarded to multiple offers through the RFP process. It's going to help ensure that individual municipalities and other buyers can select that best vendor for each project component, rather than all of the communities being using the same single vendor. This is a very small change in statute, but we think it would have a huge impact for how communities access service, and really clarifying what's going on in statute. And then the final area that I want to bring to you, that the Legislative Committee is hoping to bring to you today, is around climate change mitigation and resiliency, and particularly looking at how we're funding the necessary investments. In the last session, the Legislative Committee brought to this body the HERO Coalition, the HERO legislation, which is a housing environment revenues option legislation that would raise the deeds excise fee. And a complementary bill that's being brought this session is around zero carbon renovation fund, which would dedicate $300 million of the remaining ARPA funds specifically for decarbonization of buildings. And the legislation contemplates that money going not just to affordable housing, but also to municipal buildings, which we know is often a really challenging piece of infrastructure to invest in. We'd also look at investing in small businesses. This is a first-time file bill, like many on this list, but as a group that has been continuing, that started advocating even in the last legislative session for funding, but this is the first time that there's been legislation proposed. And then the final proposal is around a green bank, which comes straight out of Metro Common, where this would be a way to raise funds and prioritize investments related to reducing greenhouse gases. And this would, again, be a specific dedicated revenue stream that would capitalize the bank. And we see a huge opportunity around a green bank, particularly because of the Inflation Reduction Act, which would be that initial stream of funding if we're able to act quickly. Our understanding is that the state is working on some of these issues even as we speak, but the endorsement of the executive committee would mean that we are able to more fully weigh in on what that needs to be and how it would look in the Commonwealth. With that, I'm going to stop and would love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Leah. I see Erin Wortman has her hand raised.
All right, thank you. Hopefully I'll come across clear. With the TNC conversation, the original legislation was for 10 years. Is the thought that adding the fees to the other TNC eligible companies would also extend it beyond the original 10 years? Is that part of the conversation?
I don't know if that has been part of the conversation. I'm going to look to Lizzie and Georgia that have been going deeper on this particular piece of legislation. I'm seeing Lizzie shaking her head.
Yeah, no, that's not really what we're talking about right now. That's like the going beyond the 10-year piece is not really part of it at the moment.
Okay, but if you add like the other, like data collection and the other fee structure, is the thought like that would mirror the existing timeline and then you deal with the timeline after? Do you know what I'm saying? Or
yeah, I mean,
to add on that.
I'm just so unclear. Are you talking about the sunset provision that's in there and on
Yes.
the Yeah. So, I mean, we would love to actually just create a new fee structure overall for the trips. And so it would actually not touch that, like that would subsume that legislation in general. There are some nuanced pieces around adding a fee on the food delivery that I think we need to we might file placeholder legislation with your approval, but I think that we still need to research and figure out if that's actually feasible.
Yeah.
But that fee structure would mirror any new fee structure that we'd create for TNCs.
Okay, that makes sense, like creating something that is complementary, but would also take the place of if something new was updated. That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And I will note, Georgia put a link to the webinar that we're having tomorrow on this research report release. It's so cool, and you guys should all come.
Thank you, Erin. Other questions, Colette?
Not a question so much as a comment, and I'm really actually very sorry we can't come to your meeting tomorrow. I had registered for it, but we have our mobility committee at the same time anyway. I would say that the balance between DoorDash and food deliveries and general deliveries and Uber and Lyft might really vary by community. I can just speak from my street alone that there's a lot of deliveries on our street post-COVID. No Ubers and Lyfts, rarely. So, I mean, I think it might really be very varied by community. And I am really interested to see if this becomes a permanent thing, because I know when we look at the money from the TNCs, it's not a lot in our community, but it does fund some things. It's kind of like it funds transportation for kids to town camp and things that we'd like to, support in the future. But if those fees aren't permanent, it's hard to use that in that way. But, the impact is certainly permanent. So I'm not sure why the fee structure wouldn't match that. But that's just my thoughts. And I know that you said you'd send out a report of the meeting tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, you packed a lot of things in there, Colette. I'm just going to try to get to some of them. So on the research actually looks at this change in TNC trips versus app-based delivery trips and is really trying to create the data based on what we've seen on the impact in our communities. That's why we need the legislation to actually capture the data, because it'll give us the real picture, just like we're now able to have with the impact of rider-based TNC trips. So that's kind of that you kind of hit on exactly why we need the data legislation, because right now it's all anecdotal. And we can create some data based on other known factors, but it's not the actual trip data. So that's why we need that. And there has been a really significant shift during COVID to say that more people are actually doing app-based delivery that is being done in a TNC as opposed to the actual rider TNC trips. That changed dramatically. I mean, it's the data flipped the two sort of types of trips. So you'll see that as a sneak preview, spoiler alert. It will not surprise any of you. And then on this legislative piece, I think our fee for TNC fees for rider-based TNC trips is it's so small compared to our sister major metros across the country. We're still at that 20-cent fee. And, you look at the chart and Chicago's over $1. So part of what we're trying to do this session is actually refile legislation that we've filed in the past to increase that TNC fee. We can talk a little bit and speculate about where the appetite for that might be inside the legislature, but we definitely would file that. And so any community that's benefiting from those rider fee dollars that are going back to cities and towns, we wouldn't touch that. You'd still get those dollars, but ideally you'd get more.
And one small note on the, I don't know how heavy the kit is for the naloxone, but I will just share that our police department in their current budget is applying for certain vests for the staff that can hold some of the gear, because the gear they're required to carry now is so heavy that when you carry it on your waist belt, it starts to cause health and wellness issues. So I don't know, it's just a small thing, but I don't know how much weight you're adding to the required carry. And I just wanted to mention that.
That's really helpful Colette. It's always interesting to see how things intersect with each other, and one small change can be just enough to necessitate other changes. So we'll definitely be working closely with advocates and the police community to be sure we're understanding sort of these broader impacts as the legislation moves forward. Yeah, that's actually I had not heard that additional weight conversation before. Thank you.
Thank you, Colette. Any other questions for the team? All right, Buzz.
Well, if nobody else has a current question on the new issues, I think they're really wonderful, and it's congratulations to the team of pulling it together. I actually have one that I forgot to raise at the legislative committee, so I'll do it here as a topic for future research. There's been an increasing suggestion that the infrastructure needs of the South Shore and some of the West Coast, some of the western suburbs and the North Shore on water and sewer are stressing not only economic development but also equity. And there seemed to be a movement at the end of the last session to ponder, I guess the euphemistic word would be helping MWRA see the benefit of being a little more lenient and coming up with better deals for this, particularly the South Shore communities. I wonder if that's anything which you've thought about not including, thought about having as a future problem, or do our communities not think it's a problem, notwithstanding the ones who talk to me? Thank you.
Oh man, getting to talk about water infrastructure, Buzz, just always makes me happy. I don't know that there's a necessary legislative component to that challenge with MWRA and communities. My understanding is that with their change around the onboarding fee, that has changed some of the conversation. So I hadn't heard that there were more challenges. I'm sure Martin Pillsbury on the environment team has heard far more than I have, as I'm sort of getting back up to speed on this issue. But I would be very interested to hear more of kind of what the needs are and what some of the opportunities might be in the space.
I'll just add in here, we don't have Martin or Eric Hove on the call today, who are the two primary staff people working on this issue of new MWRA communities. We do, however, have Mo, who serves on the advisory committee, and Vandana, who is very actively engaged on this question from a state perspective. I haven't had an update for the last month, so I'm a little behind. But I also did not think it required a legislative solution. I thought that any steps that were possible and are still under consideration, not yet implemented, were steps that I believe could be taken from a regulatory perspective or by the board of the MWRA. I did not think they required legislative approval. If Mo or Vandana wish to comment on that, they certainly can. Otherwise, we will research it and
color me
conclusion in the future.
I'm reassured, so thank you.
Great, thank you, Buzz. All right,
I'm
any other questions?
happy to add that for any community that wants to join the MWRA, even right now, they don't really need any legislative pathway. The approval pathway already exists. Now, of course, as the MWRA is looking to the North Shore and the South Shore and even the Metro West area to potentially expand into, they have conducted preliminary feasibility studies, as many of you are aware of, one for each of those regions, and the Metro West one is still underway. The price tag is quite huge. And so that's probably where some legislative action could potentially occur. But in terms of regulatory pathway and feasibility to connect, it's either the regulatory pathway exists and feasibility is more on the cost side and the infrastructure side, which is the closest area within the existing MWRA infrastructure can a community connect to much more easily access the water And then, of course, there are the water quality issues they'll have to contend with when you have some other external source of water that's going to be combined with your own source, unless a community is going to get MWRA water or is planning to get it and be fully served by the MWRA. So I think what the feasibility study that's been done is really looking at very high level potential costs, and even sort of to give a sense of which communities could possibly connect where and what the order of magnitude of the cost would be. I see Mo has his hand up as well. Mo?
Oh, Mo, you're on.
Thank you. MWRA Advisory Board had a workshop meeting at BC last Friday. There should be a video available of that. There was a very comprehensive presentation on this issue with respect to the communities involved and the potentials. Some of the questions involved whether or not there's enough capacity going forward. And the presentation is quite extensive and good and can be accessed, I believe, on the MWRA Advisory Board site. If you need to get a link, I'll try to find that and send it.
Thank you, Mo. All right, any other questions before we move to a vote?
I've just added the link to the chat window so folks can access that to get the presentation slides, as well as, I believe, the video as well of the full.
Great, thank you, Dr.
Full workshop.
Okay, so seeing no other hands, what I think I'd like to do is ask for a motion to endorse the new policy priorities as have been presented and discussed, and to reaffirm support for the existing priorities so that the government affairs team can know they have our continuing support in advocating for these priorities with the legislature and the new administration. Anybody willing to make that motion?
So move.
Second.
That was made by Mo, seconded by Tabor.
Yes.
Close enough, good. Okay, any further discussion on the motions? Okay, seeing none, I will call the roll. Ime.
Aye.
Sharonda. Colette.
Aye.
Kurt. Karen.
Aye.
Adam, I vote yes. Jen.
Aye.
Tom, excuse me, Tom. I think we have Tom. John DePriest.
Aye.
Mo.
Aye.
Thank you, Mo. Shagun.
Aye.
Tabor.
Aye.
Angie. Gina.
Aye.
Steve Olenoff.
Aye.
Sarah. Yeah, Sarah. Nope. Courtney. Vandana. Oh, thank you, Sarah. Vandana.
I'm going to abstain.
Sam.
Aye.
Steve Silvera.
Aye.
Monica. Juan. Elaine.
Aye.
And Aaron.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Did you see, Adam, that Sharonda voted aye in the chat?
Oh, thank you, Colette.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Andrea,
Thank you.
Andrea, if you can record that and add her vote to the tally.
Will do. Thank you.
And
Thank you
just to
guys
be
so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you,
clear on the vote, Elaine abstained, correct?
Correct. Elaine and Vandana both abstained. All right, good work, team. Although I think I know the work is really ahead more than anything else, but good work today. Thank you. All right, so why don't we move to our last substantive agenda item, which is a third continuation of our round robin for sharing amongst this group of what's happening in our communities or in the roles that we serve in. We've had some great sharing in the two prior iterations of this. And the list that I have for folks that have not yet shared are Sharonda, Jen, John DePriest, Diego shared last time, and we heard from Shagun a little earlier, so I won't put you on the spot again. Angie, Courtney, Steve Silvera, Monica, and Juan. So once again, to frame this is just to share what's happening, whether it be in your community or the role that you serve in as a gubernatorial appointee, so that those on the call, those on this executive committee can get to know you and the issues that you're working on a little more clearly. Of course, these are the type of things that might more naturally happen if we were sitting in a room together. So this round robin has been a good way for us to continue to get to know each other and hopefully build continued rapport and camaraderie in the group. So why don't I start with the first name on the list I have with Sharonda.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see folks. So yeah, I've been a gubernatorial appointee for a while. I live in Jamaica Plain, and I've actually lived in Boston my entire life. I'm Bostonian, but I lived in Jamaica Plain the last like 25 or so years in the Forest Hills area. Seen lots of changes in my neighborhood. It's been quite interesting. And I work at Massachusetts Association of Community Development Corporations, where I run the Mel King Institute for Community Building. So I've been at MACDC for about 20 years and running the Mel King Institute. And just to note, the Institute is statewide. So I do a lot of statewide work. And my main work is capacity building. And I have something beeping, hold on. My main work is capacity building, and I work with primarily for our CDC members, but ultimately for the community development field. So a lot of the work that I do in partnering to offer trainings and other opportunities, such as mentoring programs, are open to folks beyond the CDC field. We've had folks, actually our mentoring program, we're doing a series with organizers and project managers, folks that are working on affordable housing. So the mentee window has closed, but we have had some interest from some MAPC staff, and we've had, I think Lizzie was a mentor in the past. So, my work definitely crosses over a lot with MAPC. We have through the Mel King Institute offered urban planning courses and community engagement. So we work with the community engagement team. They're doing a virtual community engagement course for us next month. So there's a lot of partnership there. And I would also just highlight my work at MACDC on our racial equity pledge, which actually came from our membership. After the things that happened in 2020 with George Floyd, our members said, we really need to commit to this issue. So we worked with our members to develop a pledge and to have them sign on to it and also adopt goals. So not to just sign on and name and, put out a statement like, yeah, we're for this, but to really think about what their organization can do to move the needle. And my work has been in supporting them and doing that by offering different forums, such as trainings on the root causes. Our racial equity pledge looks at the root causes, understanding that as it's central to our work, representation on the board, representation in staff, and representation in programs. So as members sign on and adopt goals, they think about what's the work that they need to do in those different areas. And then we offer forums for them to grow and learn and share what they're doing. So I would say I also have been really busy with, we have a big executive transition happening at MAPC. Joe Kreisberg, after 29 years, is moving on, as one does, to greater opportunities. So there's going to be some exciting, leadership transition in our organization, and, looking forward to what's happening there and what's gonna lay before us. So I don't know how long people have been taking, because sadly I missed the last couple of meetings due to my schedule, but I guess I'll stop there.
That was perfect. That was right in the sweet spot.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So the next person on my list is Jen Constable.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, everybody. I guess first I want to assure Mark I have not missed this round robin previously for fear of providing some information due to travel and illness, but nonetheless. So I am the assistant town administrator for the town of Rockland, and I also serve as the chair to Hull Select Board. And as I often joke, maybe that makes me doubly crazy, but I really enjoy both roles. And we have a lot going on the South Shore. In Rockland, we are working on, we're sort of entering the implementation phase in a lot of our downtown revitalization work. And that's some fun projects. We're working on a Walk This Way public art campaign, sort of highlighting the Emerson Shoe Factory and shoe history, if you will, here in Rockland, where we'll have shoes throughout town that'll be decorated by local artists at pivotal points and areas of attraction throughout Rockland. We're working with MAPC currently on developing some storefront and facade guidelines. And we're about to implement a wayfinding and signage program that we worked on over the course of the past year and a half or so. So that's some tangible, exciting projects that are happening. I want to thank Buzz for bringing up the question relative to MWRA and South Shore infrastructure issues. They are significant here on the South Shore, and they are really negatively impacting development and development opportunities, at least here in Rockland and some of the neighboring communities. So while on the one hand, those sort of funner, if that's a word, revitalization projects are underway, we also have a 40R district, and we're at a standstill because we have water and sewer moratoriums. So I really encourage that discussion in the region, as well as with MAPC, about opportunities to help alleviate both water and sewer. We also have a few roadway projects going on. We recently awarded a MassWorks grant and are programmed on the TIP, and that's for road work around the Union, the becoming historic Union Point redevelopment project, which actually has some positive movement. And I guess in Hull, we have some exciting work going on around the focus on climate adaptation and resiliency, working actually with Ann Herbst. The town formed recently a climate adaptation committee. This is exciting work because it's pulling together, I think, all of our departments and some elected officials in looking to see how are we responding and how can the community respond from both the staff perspective and resident business perspective to climate change. We're hearing more and more from agencies and developers and partnerships that there's actually somewhat of a pause on funding certain projects because of that outstanding question about, flood issues. And so that's obviously a problem for a community that's looking to continue to grow and develop. On the development front, we have our last large developable parcel that's owned by the Hull Redevelopment Authority. That is, they're working under urban renewal plan right now. And it's kind of a controversy in town. Some people would like to see the space remain open space, and some would like to see it developed. And the question right now is, how will that redevelopment look in the future? And on a very promising, somewhat sad note, there's been a new and a renewed focus on the affordable housing question in Hull. It's been a conversation that has sadly been stalled for too long, but is now coming largely into focus. And so that is exciting for those of us looking to advance those opportunities in town. I think that's about all. I think you wanted to, on a personal note, I'll share maybe a little fun fact. I am a competitive rower and I'm starting to prepare to train for the indoor crash bee races this March. So call me triply crazy, I suppose.
That's great. That's great. You need the rowing to work out all of your select board meeting stress, is what I'm hearing. Thank you for sharing all of that, Jen. Appreciate it. Next is John DePriest. We still have John?
Yes, I'm here.
Go for it, John.
Hi, I'm John DePriest. I'm the Director of Permitting and Land Use Planning in the City of Chelsea. On February 2nd, I'll start my 30th year here. I grew up in Malden. I lived in Somerville for a couple of years, and I've lived in Medford for the past 35 years. Served on the planning board in Medford for 28 years. I've been the city's rep to MAPC since I started in 1994, and I am co-chair of the Inner Core Committee. I think I'm into my third or fourth term there. As here in Chelsea, my primary focus is staffing 4 boards, zoning board, planning board, conservation commission, and historical commission. And I just came off of a ZBA board meeting last night where I had 15 cases, 3 of them marijuana dispensaries. And one of them was a request for an extension of a major development on the waterfront, this extension of the special permit, 590 residential units, 30,000 square feet of retail and office, which did not get approved. So that site, as an 18-acre site, will have to come back for some redevelopment options. Let me see. Some of the things we're working on, obviously, is glad to hear that MAPC is trying to help us communities with the MBTA communities. That's very important to us and how we are going to address that. We have a proposal on a 3-acre site for electrical storage in huge batteries. They will purchase electricity at non-peak hours and then sell it back to the system at peak hours. We have 390,000 square foot biolab building, 140,000 square foot light industrial building, and a number of smaller residential developments, anywhere ranging from 2 to anywhere up to 60 units coming in. We're doing a lot of work on climate change, which MAPC has been helping us with. And we are also looking at I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. An economic development study of the former Mystic Mall area. Personal side, I am helping my daughter plan her wedding next August. And as father of the bride, I found that my role in planning is mainly signing checks. So, but that I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That was great. It's good perspective for a planner to have to be the one to sign the checks, right? It's a So the last person on the list that I have, who I think is also here, is Steve Silvera. I don't know if you'd like to share, Steve.
The honest answer is I wouldn't like to share, but if the rules are that we have to share, then I will share. But if you ask me to list the things I least like to do, talking about myself would be pretty close to the top of the list. But I know Mark is, if nothing else, relentless, and he will keep after me. So I might as well get it out of the way here in 2022. So hi, Steve Silvera, gubernatorial appointee, first appointed by Mitt Romney. So that was a few governors ago. Let's see, I live in Melrose, Mass, where I've lived for 24 years. I am, however, one of the few people you'll meet around here, or at least the minority of people you'll meet around here, who neither grew up in Massachusetts nor went to school in Massachusetts, since most of you folks did both, but almost all of you did one. As I say to my wife, they're very strong umbilical cords around this place. Nobody ever seems to want to go anywhere, although my parents grew up here, and truth be told, if my father's work hadn't taken him out of Massachusetts, I'm sure I would have grown up in Massachusetts. I'm a lobbyist at ML Strategies, so I advise a number of clients, mainly with the executive branch, a little bit on the legislative branch, but mainly with the executive branch, often development clients or institutional clients. I think for those of you who haven't spent a lot of time with lobbyists, one of the things you would be surprised with is the high percentage of my time is spent telling clients what they can't possibly ask government for, or what they can't possibly ask government to do, as opposed to going into the government to ask them to do things. I think it's more the majority of time is explaining to people how government works, as opposed to trying to get the government to do things. So that's what I do. So I desperately hope we have a strong economy, because if we're going to have development, we're going to need a strong economy. So I hope that we can keep that going. And unless there are any questions, which I'm hoping there aren't, I don't know what else to tell you.
Thank you, Steve. That would be very unfair of me to allow people to ask you questions when no one else has been asked questions.
Well, my presentation was the shortest, so perhaps I'll default to books if people start asking me questions, so that's okay.
Sounds good. That was great. Thank you so much. Is there anybody that I missed? I keeping this list through the 3 meetings between me and a few other MAPC staff. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anybody who wants to share.
Did you get the non-voting members, the past presidents, Buzz and myself? It's Keith.
You know what? I don't think we that was not on the roster I was working from, but if Buzz and Keith or Keith and Buzz want to share, we've got about 10 minutes left, so let's go.
I abdicate because he can spend at least 10 minutes. So well,
I just can't believe people don't know Keith and Buzz. Like, come on.
It's Keith Bergman in Concord. I'm currently Concord's representative to the MAPC Council. I'm an MAPC past president, chair of the legislative committee, as you know. Now a retired town manager type who advises. I'm a volunteer as a senior advisor for active town managers. So I'm probably talking with people in your communities, or I'm one of the shoulders to cry on when things get tough. But that's a main area I'm volunteering in. The other main area is with affordable housing. I chair Concord's Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. The big issue for us is MBTA community zoning with inclusionary. That is included in our housing production plan, which we're updating. The planning board unanimously adopted the housing production plan last night. The select board will vote on it on Monday night, and we're successful in not having MBTA communities removed from a draft plan, as the chair of our select board thought, we're never going to do this. Why should we even bother to put it in? And I said, well, that's a deal breaker. I think if it's not in, it's not. If you keep in mind who approves housing production plans, it's the same state agency that will see whether we're in compliance with MBTA communities or not. So it's very important that we put it in there, and that's going to be the big struggle in the coming years. But I'm happy to have so much company who are fighting the good fight for affordable housing, and delighted that there's the technical support from MAPC that will be so important in getting this implemented. So thanks all very much for the work you do.
Thank you, Keith. Buzz, you got at least 2-3 minutes if you want to go.
Well, I can be much shorter, but I'll take a shot. Buzz Constable from Lincoln, like Keith, a former president and a former long-term legislative committee chair. And I am no longer developing and owning and managing real estate, mostly on the South Shore and in downtown Boston. However, my life these days is spent on following my land use interest, in this case, conservation, working statewide on land conservation transactions, and working with the state on things like PLPA, the no net loss bill that got passed, and occasionally with folks like the MAPC legislative staff. In fact, the connection between land use conservation and affordable housing and economic development really is networked. It's all the same thing. And for example, I'm running a conference next spring of the land trust communities, in which the theme is land use, affordable housing and conservation. And we have the head of housing for neighborhood development for Boston is going to be a keynote speaker. The idea that I would say Mark Rassicott has been one of the foremost players for is the whole idea of using zoning and smart growth to save natural resources that need to be saved and accommodate the kind of building that needs to be built. And I think we have a long way to go. But I keep hanging around MAPC, enjoying what steps we take. So I don't have any new news, except the connection between conservation and affordable housing, which I can assert the trustees of reservations and CLF and ELM are all working on. So that's my report. Leaving you with time for an anecdote or something.
Thank you, Buzz.
We don't have to take all our time. We can let people.
We can give people a bio break. Colette, you see your hands raised?
I wondered if Buzz could share information about that conference in the spring on housing and conservation, because that conversation does come up a lot, and I'd love to give that to our NRC and our housing people.
I'd be happy to talk to you offline about it and let everybody else go. I would say that the Wellesley Conservation Trust is more or less actively involved in it, so they've been involved as well. But I'd be happy to talk to you at some point. Thanks.
But Buzz, if you can, at the appropriate time, send a link to the staff so that we can just, when the conference has been announced, so we can share it with other members of the executive committee.
Great. I will do that probably 3 weeks from now.
Fine.
Thank you, Buzz. And thank you to everybody who shared today or shared in the past 2 sessions. I think this was a really great idea offered by Mark, so we could all start to get to know each other a little bit better. So with that, the next agenda item is any other business not known at the time of the posting of the agenda. Mark, anything?
There is only one item, and it's apropos of what was just discussed in the chat. George Proakis, also known AKA as the second Melrose member of the committee, has resigned as a member of the executive committee because he is now city manager in the town of Watertown. I will be declaring that seat vacant, and at the winter council meeting, there will be an opportunity to elect a new city representative.
Great.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Mark. All right. With that, I want to thank everybody for their time today. We got through a pretty big agenda in an efficient manner. Wish everybody a happy holidays and entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make that motion.
Second.
Motion's made by John DePriest, seconded by Mo. I actually saw the 2 mouths moving this time. I think first time I've pulled it off. With that, I'll call the roll. Ime.
Aye.
Sharonda. I think Sharonda had to leave. Colette.
Aye.
Karen.
Yes.
Adam, I vote aye. Jen.
Aye.
John DePriest.
Aye.
Mo.
Aye.
Tabor.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Steve Olenoff.
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
Vandana.
Aye.
Sam.
Aye.
Steve Silvera.
Aye.
Elaine.
Aye.
And Aaron.
Aye.
All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Happy
Appreciate it.
holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.